Howdy, listeners. Amber here. So if you are a Trap House regular, you're probably already in the tank for Bernie. And good for you. You've seen the light. But do you know that there are some people out there who are not yet aware that not only is Bernie Sanders the best candidate for the working class of America and abroad, he's the only one who can beat Donald Trump? Well, that is where you come in. You get to be the Bernie ambassadors, the Bern ambassadors, the Bern voice, the Bernissaries. And here today with me and Matt to talk about how to talk about Bernie is his very own speechwriter, David Sirota. David, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I think the place to start is with electability. I think a lot of people, particularly like progressives, are leaning towards less quote-unquote radical candidates. They think like a softer policy is going to be more electable. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Bernie's approach to electability, because it's quite different.
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody who believes that the way to get elected and the way to be electable is to put forward an agenda that would actually do things for people and help people. And there's this idea out there that electability and a progressive populist agenda are in tension with each other, that the more progressive you are, the more you're coming up with ideas that would actually help lots of people, the harder it is to actually get people to vote for you. And Bernie's ideas, actually, it's the other way around. Now, I will say this. There's obviously, in the corporate view, I think they're actually saying is that, yeah, you may be coming up with policies that could help people, tuition-free public colleges, Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage. But in pushing those policies, you're going to prompt the ire, the anger of corporate America, which will spend against you, and that way you will lose the election. So in other words, the argument against Bernie's view is sort of an argument that accepts a corrupt political system and says the only way to deal with a corrupt political system is to essentially appease it, essentially surrender to it. And Bernie's idea is the opposite, that corrupt political system has to be defeated, and the only way to defeat it, the only way is to create a grassroots movement, and the only way to create a grassroots movement is to actually offer people an agenda that serves them and not the corporate class.
Right. I think it's kind of telling how low the sort of like, let's say traditional Democratic Party apparatus thinks everyone's standards are. Like, we went from assuming that we'd have to do something just barely to the left of what the Republicans do. And we've proven that to be unelectable. We've proven that people just don't get excited about that. And that people don't necessarily trust that someone who runs on that is either capable or willing to make those changes. And it's really good news. I think people don't want to it's weird. People don't want to accept the good news that actually people are much more left than we thought that they were.
I mean, there's a number of reasons for that. One is just learned helplessness over generations of being told the same thing over and over again. And the idea that the 1972 election is the only election that ever mattered in terms of lessons. But also I think there's this fetish for wonkery, this fetish for this idea that
we're the smart guys in the room.
Exactly. That the idea that nuance, that means testing, it means sort of soft touch, a regulatory sort of regime, and not any kind of broad stuff, because that's sort of considered dumb. Right. And you're not going to you're going to alienate people who want something. They want proof that their politician is on the ball, and that means that their plans are very complicated.
It's like how they demonize the word populism, right? I mean, the word populism means things that are basically popular, and somehow that's like it's now considered bad to be called a populist. And obviously the folks who are against the kind of agenda that Bernie pushes, they've taken populist and given it to, Donald Trump is supposedly a populist, or, Bolsonaro in Brazil is supposedly a populist. But really what it means is these are policies that are popular. But I think you're right in the sense of the looking down upon policies that are popular as policy, that those policies are supposedly primitive or they're pandering to the people. That the idea that the highest, this idea that the most enlightened politicians are the ones who can say no to the people, right? Who are willing to basically step on the people. I mean, that has been a kind of ideology in Washington for 30, 40 years, that you can't succumb to what the people want, that only the mature adults in the room are the ones who oppose what average, ordinary people want.
Yeah, liberals can be really suspicious of democracy and really suspicious of the motivations of the people. And I think I've said this before on the show, but like you sort of realize at some point that the bigger difference between myself and other people politically has more to do with whether or not you think people are generally good or not. And I think given the chance, people are generally very good and rational, and all we have to do is sort of give them that chance. I think, as the party has sort of drifted rightward, it betrays a kind of cynicism and suspicion of people. And you really don't need to have that. I think Bernie likes and trusts people. I don't know. I think that is what worked for him very well early on, and continues to work on.
I mean, I would just be curious. I mean, what do you think about? I mean, some people look at the last election, the 2016 election, and there's this idea out there that the 2016 election. I'm not saying I agree with this, but there is this sort of underlying idea that the 2016 election proves that you can't trust the people. I mean, you kind of hear. I'm not saying I agree with that, but you hear that sort of. Oh well, look. If any country that would elect Donald Trump, the theory is that means that people sort of can't be trusted. I mean, I reject that idea, but that's something out there that's kind of in sort of the liberal discourse.
I think when you're fed two bad choices, it's not going to make sense to. It doesn't make sense to hold people sort of accountable for. Basically a large number of disaffected people who didn't vote at all, of course, and then a weird kind of insurgency of people who literally just want something different from the status quo. I mean, I wish he hadn't won, but at the same time, looking back, it seems like we should have really seen it coming.
Oh no, that was the funny thing. Just when I look back at what I was saying and what we were talking about in the
over
run-up,
and over,
it was always just we would come to the precipice and we would all say, well, it's certainly trending in the direction of something like Trump being president in the future, but we're not there yet. Surely we're not there yet. Mm-hmm. People have not become that disaffected from all of these ideas of propriety and professionalism and politics.
Well, and just stability.
Yeah, we still have a certain understanding that you can't just let a game show host be president. That would be ridiculous. And it turns out, no, not nearly enough people still believed in that for that to be the deciding factor, because that was really the only thing that the Clinton campaign was running on was you can't.
We're not him.
It's like, come on. No. Right. But it turns out, if after the economy craters and it's a decade of a recovery that does very little for anybody who wasn't already very wealthy beforehand. It turns out that there's not a lot of investment in those institutions and in those frameworks of legitimacy.
Well, more so like people actually resent it. Like they resent the dynasty system. I mean, they resent the sort of trajectory of the Democratic Party, particularly since the 90s. And they have very good reason to resent that. And at the very least, I can completely understand why some Rust Belt voter wouldn't fucking vote, especially since, she didn't campaign.
Right. It was the worst possible combination of things because the media attitude was, can you believe this? This can't be, without articulating why, without articulating alternative. But also, and because of this the patent ridiculousness of Trump, then he's clearly going to lose. So that was another thing that led to it, is that people were like, I don't even have to bother. Even if you think that Trump would be ridiculous and would be a bad president, there's no point in me going to vote for him because he's going to lose anyway, and there's nothing for me to vote for that I'm actually excited for on the ballot. So I'll just stay home, and then boom, it turns out, yeah.
So actually, also to go back to that, there's also Biden, who I think a lot of people favor just because he's a familiar face, and because they want things to go back to normal.
Yes. They just want to pretend the 4 years didn't happen.
Right. And Biden's banked off that, too. He's like, nothing will change.
Yes, he's explicitly selling the people that. Nothing will change.
That quote was
amazing. It was a gift.
Unbelievable.
It was a gift.
It was so honest.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. You don't even have to make a case against that. He's literally saying the choice in the primary is, I am saying to these donors, nothing will fundamentally change.
For anyone.
I'm not really clear why sort of said that out loud. I mean, it's like the old idea that they're saying out loud the things that that they whisper. I'm not clear why he went out and he said that out loud.
I'll be honest, I don't think he's a very good campaigner.
Well, he hasn't had to run a competitive campaign for 40 years. I mean, once he was in office, I mean, Delaware is one of the most sort of lockdown machine states in the country. That the Democrats and Republicans in that state basically like come together. They do a thing after every election.
Or is it the Delaware way? Is
yeah,
that
the Delaware way. They do a thing after every election where they get together, all the candidates, and they like eat crap.
Put
and
them
they
in a wicker man.
And they bury a hatchet, yes, and then they burn a wicker man with a socialist in it. And they just horse trade everything, and like the elections are secondary because it's like a banana republic for insurance companies and credit card companies. And so that's the politics that he has been in for the last 40 years. So the idea of getting mass numbers of people to actually vote for you has not. I mean, he's run for president before, and he's just been gloriously failed at it every time.
Right. Well, he didn't have any name recognition.
Yeah. Now he does.
Now he does.
Now he's got that. So that's the one thing he has going for him.
And
now.
people do associate him with a political administration that, if not particularly good, at least didn't feel like there was an emergency every 20 minutes.
Right. Normalcy. Yeah,
Right.
He might as well just dust off the Warren G. Harding playbook and just go with a return to normalcy as his campaign slogan.
And the problem I think there is that one, that the nothing will fundamentally change going back to normalcy. I mean, obviously normal wasn't great for millions and millions of people, but the political problem is to make the case against that. You are arguing that actually things are in a worse shape than what's being projected.